Assalamualaikum and a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the interview workshop for Virtual Science Fair 2021. I would like to welcome our guest of honor, Ms. Phing Lim. She is a professional career coach certified by International Coach Federation, ICF, and international speaker with more than a decade of experience at many renowned companies. She is also the founder of God Aping and has been featured as top 70 rising personalities in LinkedIn 2020. I hope you are in the pink of health. We are overjoyed to have you as our guest speaker today. My name is Amira Arianti and I will be the MC for today. On behalf of the organizer, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the VSF workshop on how to approach an interview. Without further ado, I would like to invite Ms. May Ping Lim to start on our workshop today.
Hi everyone, thanks for the kind invite for today's workshop. So I'm really excited to be here. I firstly want to thank every single person who actually took time on their Friday morning. So I understand Fridays are very precious, not just for you, for me, and for most people. So thanks for taking the time and waking up so early for today's workshop at 9 o'clock. And if you happen to be watching this broadcast at a later time, I also hope that you gain as much insights as possible. Okay, so without further ado, let me pull out some of my slides. And if you have any questions, I'll take the questions right at the end. But what I would suggest for you to get the most out of the session is grab a pen, paper, or notebook and take as many notes as possible. And if you have any questions, just to clarify any doubts and with any clarification, advice, and so forth, then that's something that you can ask in the live stream, and I'll get them answered at the end of the workshop later on. So, all right, so let me pull out my slides very quickly. All right. Okay, let me broadcast it clearly. All right, so thank you so much for joining my workshop today, which is titled How to Approach an Interview. I think the fact that you are thinking about the importance of acing an interview as part of your professional development and also personal development is something that is a massive kudos to you. I've worked with a lot of job seekers, and what I have found is that sometimes during the job search process, interview is one of the last things on their mind. So what happens is that they go about the job search process, and when they get an interview, they get very excited over it, and then the feeling of nervousness comes in almost immediately. So I think for a lot of students, by participating in the VSF career fair and getting this sort of like insights and tips at the beginning of your career and even before you graduate as a student, year 1, year 2, doesn't matter, but having the interest to learn the actual tips that will help prepare you to be a stronger candidate when you graduate or even when you're seeking for internship. So that's something really important as well. So give yourself a massive pat on the back for making an effort to join today's workshop. All right. So just a little bit about myself before we begin. Hi, my name is Mei Ping. I am actually a chartered accountant for a lot of people who don't really know much about me. Nowadays, I spend my time as a career coach, mainly helping job seekers and working professionals to grow their career online and offline. So some of the top organizations or universities that I work with include the University of Hong Kong for the master's program, the NTU of Singapore, and of course, I also conduct talks like these to support a lot of students as job seekers and working professionals to pretty much level up their skill set, not just in their job search process, but more importantly, how they can actually set up their career in the right way. So some of the logos that you see here are organizations that I used to work with in the past. So I have been in the corporate world for more than 10 years before I transitioned into career coaching. So some of the big companies that I've worked for include Ernst & Young in risk and advisory, Visa as a regional auditor, as well as Standard Chartered as the head of governance for Standard Chartered's financial institutions, as well as fintech portfolio worth $1 billion. So what I will be sharing with you today would be very practical insights that these are things that actually happens in the corporate world, and particularly on the subject of interview. What I will be sharing with you today, it's basically what hiring managers actually have in mind. So this is more practical, not so much theory based. So I will share with you some perspectives that every single hiring manager or HR cares about, and more importantly, how you can take this perspective and take this view to better position yourself as the best candidate. So there'll be a lot of practical insights and experiences that I'll be hoping to share with you throughout today's session. Okay, so last things here, if we have not yet connected on LinkedIn, there's a QR code over there. Hope to also connect with you on LinkedIn as well. All right, so let's move on to the next portion. Okay, so before we dive right into the how to approach an interview, I first want to take you through a standard career journey. So what you're seeing on screen right now, basically this is a this is like a six-step, or rather six part of a career journey every single professional will go through. So it doesn't matter if you are a student, a fresh graduate, or a working professional at any certain point in your career, you will definitely go through either all of these six steps or related items of these six steps. So given the fact that today's audience, most of you guys are students, so I'll just give you a very quick overview on what these six steps are, and more importantly, why do they actually matter in your career? And of course, eventually, how does it impact the success of you going through that job interview process? So the first portion is always about identifying your career interest and direction. So that's something more around what do you want to do, and basically why you are going to pursue a certain career, a certain industry, or a certain job. So when I work with a lot of job seekers, when they come and work with me for interview preparation, one of the questions I always like to ask them is, okay, so actually, what do you want to get out of their career? But this is also a question that I find a lot of them cannot answer. So if you cannot answer this basic question, it doesn't matter what you have prepared for your job interview, because you don't have clarity, and rather you don't have conviction on why you are going for this job interview in the first place. So always, no matter where you are in your career, always start by thinking of the direction that you want to pursue, and basically what do you really want to get out of your career in the next 2 to 3 years, especially if you are a fresh graduate. So this will be a really strong starting point that could actually position yourself really well as a candidate, not just for any internship, but in a full-time position as well. So first step is the most important thing. And after you have your career clarity, interest, and direction pretty much buttoned down, then you'll then move into resume update. So resume update is basically positioning yourself as the best candidate, bringing out your education, background, skills, and experiences to convince the hiring manager that, okay, right, I'm like the best person that you can find, so please invite me for an interview. So again, step two is also very important, because again, when I work with candidates for interview preparation and mock interview, a lot of times what happens is that they cannot explain their their education. They couldn't really explain their background. They couldn't explain their experiences. And a lot of times this is because their resume was not prepared correctly. So if your resume is kind of vague, it doesn't have a lot of information, you will definitely find yourself struggling during the job interview. So this is just to highlight a little bit more on, based on a lot of people that I've interviewed at Standard Chartered. So at Standard Chartered, whenever my team publishes a role, we tend to get about 400 to 500 applicants. So I would interview maybe 5 or 6. So these are very common things that actually happen. So it doesn't matter if you are a student, a graduate, somebody who has worked 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years. These are actually pretty common problems. Okay, so once you have your resume set up, then we can then go into job search. So job search, there are traditional methods. Of course, there's the more modern method of actually utilizing LinkedIn as a platform for successful job search as well. So assuming that you have done step 1, 2, 3 well, then good news, you got the call for a job interview. So this one we'll actually dive into it a lot more detail in the later slides. So I'll skip this one for now. So assuming everything goes well, you manage to convince the HR and the hiring manager that you are indeed the best candidate for the job. Then once you actually join a company, then it's time to then upgrade your job soft skills. So this could be learning how to better communicate and manage your boss, your manager, communication skills, problem solving, time management, project management. So all these other soft skills that are also critical to make sure that you don't have to keep hunting for a job every 3 to 5 months. Then the last part is that once you have invested some time in growing with the company, upgrading your skills and competences and experiences, then it's time to start thinking about what career growth looks like for you. So as part of the career growth process, we may eventually come back to item number 1, which is again thinking about what is that career direction for you, and also taking stock on what you're good at and not so good at, and so that you can continue improving yourself. So the reason I wanted to share the career journey with you today before we dive directly into the job interview portion is because I have found that a lot of candidates, not just students or fresh graduates, but general job seekers, what happens is that they don't look at the career journey holistically. So what happens is that they go into each and every portion but not understanding how one aspect actually relates to the other. So it's really important that you understand how this flow works so that you can do this flow in the right steps. So one thing sometimes people get wrong is to do things in the opposite direction. So you will not get any successful results if you don't follow the right flow, because a lot of times when companies hire, this is basically like the bigger prep work that you will need to do, aside from just trying to memorize the interview answers, because that actually doesn't really work. Okay, so hopefully that has given you a little bit of a perspective on how you can actually utilize some of these steps to really plan out your career. So given that you guys are students or graduates, it's a great opportunity for you to really think about what you want to get out of your career so that you don't get stuck later on. So you can make sure that you are progressing every single year. So personally, this is also the strategy that I have used for myself. So on my background also, in my 20s alone, I already made it to senior director at Standard Chartered, and I was also running very, very big portfolios and also in senior leadership positions. So if there's one thing that you can take away, aside from the step-by-step interview bits that I will share later, then please make sure that you remember how to best plan out your career journey. All right, so let's dive right into it. So the first question, let's then talk about, what do you think is the real purpose of a job interview? What do you think is the real purpose? Why do you think companies want to meet you in person for an interview? So if you happen to have a pen and paper, or you like to participate and share a little bit more, feel free to jot down in your notebook or maybe put it in the YouTube live stream. What do you think is the real purpose of a job interview? So 10 seconds for everybody to just have a quick think about it and put it down. So a related question is that, why do you think companies want to invite you to speak to you during a job interview? If your resume is so awesome, why can't they just offer you the job immediately? So there must always be a purpose, right? Because if there is nothing to get out of a job interview, then pretty much companies can just receive your resume and then give you that job immediately, which doesn't really happen. In maybe 99% of the instances, doesn't actually happen. So before I tell you the real reason, let me tell you some of the common answers I tend to get when I ask this question. So some of the common things I've heard from my clients and students and workshop participants is number one, to share a little bit more about to talk about the things that are not in my resume. So that's actually one of the really common things I hear from students and fresh graduates. So the first assumption is that an interview is for the hiring manager to understand what's not in your resume. So that's the first one that I hear a lot. Number two, it's for the hiring manager to get to know you. So that's the other common one as well. And the third one is for the hiring manager to understand your resume a little bit better. Okay, so these are the three common ones. If you agree that these are some of the assumptions that you may have, you can put it in the live stream so that we can do a bit of a sharing later on. But let me give you the real purpose of an actual job interview. And this is from somebody like me who has hired many people from fresh graduates all the way up to other director level at basically an international bank. The actual purpose of a job interview is to understand and validate what is in your resume, and more importantly, understand if you are the best fit candidate for the job, meaning that you are not just the strongest technically, but number two is the fact that you are also a person that can get along with the rest of the team, because culture and job fit is something that is also very critical. So that's why you are invited for a job interview, not just to assess how much you know, but it's also to assess how much you are willing to learn if you don't know. So sometimes when I interview candidates, it can be a very negative experience to deal with a candidate who thinks that they know everything. Because a candidate that knows everything pretty much tells me that you have a very stuck mindset, and in case I give you an extra piece of work, you may not be very open to that. So again, job interview is always to identify you as the best candidate for the role, and how hiring managers tend to do that is to go through your resume to understand a little bit more about your background, skills, and experiences. So I do want to dispel a little bit of the assumptions that we talked about, which I think is not quite true. So the first assumption is the fact that this is something that a lot of graduates tell me. They think that a job interview is to talk about what is not in their resume. Not true, right? A job interview is specifically to discuss what is in your resume, not what is outside of resume. Because if it's important enough, it should already be in your resume. So why would I want to talk about what is not in your resume? It doesn't make sense. So it's always to talk about what is in your resume. Second thing, never make the assumption that the hiring manager has read your resume in detail. So I'm sure you guys know a lot of times before, when we actually look at resumes, it doesn't take that much time. The first impression is maybe 5 to 10 seconds. And after that, maybe if we are really interested in you, maybe like a minute or a minute and a half. So I think don't ever assume that a hiring manager has read your resume in detail. And I can share a personal experience with you. So when I was at Standard Chartered, I was in a lot of meetings every day. So in an 8-hour day, I'm probably in meetings for 4 to 5 hours. And of course, if I have candidates, I also have to interview them. So a lot of times, I only read the resume when I am walking towards the meeting room. So that's what, like 3 to 5 minutes. It's not really a very long time. And most of the time, this kind of happens if you are interviewing with hiring managers, maybe a manager, director level. They're actually quite busy in general. So never assume that. So during the job interview itself, it is your responsibility to give a snippet and to really share that quick background on what you have to offer. I've met candidates that when I ask them, oh, so what do you want to get out of it? And they would just say, oh, I'm sure you have already read my resume. And that is something that extremely turns off, because never ever make an assumption. Because if you have this habit of making an assumption, what it tells me as a hiring manager is that if I hire you, then you might also end up making a lot of assumptions in your day-to-day work, which is not a very good thing. So when we hire younger people like fresh graduates and so forth, we're actually looking for people who are very keen to learn. So asking questions, learning mindset is also very important. So all these things like may sound very simple, but it's something that an experienced hiring manager can pick up from an interview very quickly. Even sometimes when I hear a few words, I already can understand what this candidate is all about. So the other quite common assumption also is some candidates think that, oh, it's really for a hiring manager to get to know me as a person. So I just want to share also some perspective with you. This is not a popularity contest. So it's not about getting to know you as a, as an individual, but it's really very focused and targeted to really try to get to know how you can be the best candidate. So having this understanding is very, very important, because otherwise, if you don't understand this, when you answer, you may end up talking about all sorts of funny things that it doesn't actually relate to this job interview. So the purpose of a interview again is to make sure that you are the best candidate for the job. So whenever you give an answer, it always needs to target as to how you can position yourself as the best candidate. So almost like every single answer that you give should be targeted towards um, getting the company to choose you. Okay, so hopefully this is clear. I just want to spend a little bit more time on this slide particularly because having worked with a lot of job seekers, I noticed that the very concerning trend of people not understanding the purpose of a job interview. So because they don't really understand this, all the preparation work that they have done may not actually result in anything tangible because they didn't understand the actual purpose of an interview in the first place. Okay, so hopefully that clarifies, and let's move on to the next section. Okay, so this is something that I would encourage every single one of you to do before the job interview. You should actually ask yourself, would you hire you? Would you hire you? So a quick 10 seconds for self-reflection, and if you have a pen or paper, you can actually jot down an honest answer, or if you want to share in the live stream, you can feel free to do so as well. So the question is really very simple. Ask yourself, would you hire yourself? Okay, the 10 seconds is up. And the reason why I want you guys to answer this question honestly and objectively is because of this. At the end of the day, right, to be successful in any job search or a job interview, it's about mindset and self-confidence. So, if this question, you cannot wholeheartedly say you will hire yourself, meaning that, okay, you truly believe that you are the best candidate, then I can tell you that you will likely not be successful. Because if you don't truly believe that you are the best candidate, or you are at least 80 to 90% that candidate that actually fits that role that you're applying for, then it will definitely affect your confidence. It will give you a lot of anxiety and you will feel very scared. And these kind of feelings, it's very easy for an experienced hiring manager to identify that. So when you interview, you will not come across as confident. You will not come across as a person that is very sure that this is what they want. And this will also affect the way that you answer the questions, because it will always sound a little bit vague or a little bit shaky. So I would really recommend, before you step into any job interview and even before you apply for the job, you should first ask yourself, do you really have the background skills and experiences? And if you prepare well, would you really hire yourself? And if you want to be sure, in terms of like confidence level, at least 80 to 90%, right? Conviction that you are the best candidate, and even if you are not the best candidate on paper, it is about having the right attitude to say, okay, even though I'm like not the best candidate that you're speaking to, but these are all these things that I've done, and these are all these things that I'm willing to learn. Because I can tell you that personally, if you look at my career, within 10 years, I made it to senior director at Standard Chartered. And basically, the people that I work with are all in their 40s, and I was only in my late 20s. So there's a lot of answer when I interviewed for the manager position and director position, there was a lot of like uncertainty as well as to whether I could do it or not, even before I step into the interview. But I think once you decide to go for the interview, you should be very sure, and like I said, 80 to 90% sure to say, okay, even though I don't have like the you know the list of all your requirements, but these are some of the steps that I've taken, and these are some of the successes and skills that I've managed to pick up that I think can translate into this job. And this is exactly the approach that I did. So in my career, I have, as a senior associate, I've interviewed for manager positions, I've interviewed for director positions, and all different kind of positions. But like I said, before you actually step into that room, you first need to have that your self-talk and really ask yourself if, yeah, you truly believe in yourself before you want to get somebody else to believe in you. Okay, so this two slides important because I think mindset and perspective really matters a lot, and that's really what a lot of job seekers struggle with. Okay, so just a quick one on resume. So earlier I talked a little bit about how you really need to position your resume correctly. So to position your background, skills, and experiences to convince the company that it is actually worth their time to invite you for an interview. So even before the interview, if you want to increase your chances to even get called for the interview, right, you should look at your resume and look at the job posting that the company has posted, and also ask yourself again this question very honestly: do you fit the company's ideal candidate? Do you fit the company's ideal candidate? Whether it's technical skills or maybe some of like the soft skills as well. Because if you don't, if your resume doesn't really fit the company's ideal candidate, meaning that it is not, it's not a direct or a good fit for what the hiring manager is looking for, you will definitely struggle during the job interview, because it's going to be very difficult for you to explain how your education and background and skills can be a match. And sometimes, right, you may not get the job because your resume is not a good match in the first place. But sometimes hiring managers and HR may not always tell you this. So you might feel a little bit dejected and rejected. But the perspective I want to give you here is that a match and alignment is very important. So if you want to increase your chances of success, not just in a job interview, but for overall job search, right, do a little bit of a homework and an effort to match like job suitability and match against the job requirements. So that's something that I normally recommend a lot of my clients and students do. Otherwise, you may find it very frustrating to go for an interview that you have prepared so much, but eventually you feel that you don't get results. So sometimes things might have already been predetermined, and if you did a little bit of extra homework at the beginning, you can significantly increase your chances of success. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so in this slide, I just want to share with you some of the common job interview mistakes. So these are the common mistakes that you should avoid. And these are some of the things that I've shared a little bit earlier already. But just let me go through this with some examples so to give you a bit more clarity on what I'm talking about. So number one, no clear career growth direction. So as I mentioned earlier in my career journey, right, the first step is to identify what do you want to get out of your career. And this is really one of the biggest mistakes I think that candidates do during a job interview, because they have not really thought about it. So if you don't have a clear career growth direction, you're not sure, it will be very difficult for you to answer questions like, what are you hoping to get out of this job? What do you want to do in the next 3 years? Where do you see your career in 5 years? Right? How can this job help you grow as a professional? So these questions are very common questions that you will get asked during the interview, and most candidates panic. So there's no need to panic. The only homework that you need to do, and it's a very big piece of homework, is identify your career growth and your career direction. By identifying this, you are actually able to tackle many, many different questions during the interview because you have a very clear career clarity. So make sure that even before you step in, you know what you want to get out of your career and some of the skills that you are quite sure that you want to learn, because it will make it a lot easier for you to explain to the hiring manager during the interview. Okay, so second portion is around what I call vague education background. So when you guys are in university, you will definitely major or minor in a course, right? Where be it economics, engineering, whatever that is. However, when I interview candidates, sometimes I find that I'm not sure if they are very shy or they feel awkward, but I find that they tend not to explain their education background to me. So what happens is that they tend to answer. So when I ask them, okay, so tell me a little bit about your education and like what did you do and stuff like that, and they would just say, oh, I'm a fresh graduate and I'm really looking for a job, or something very vague. They would just tell me that, oh, I'm a fresh graduate. Okay, so let me tell you, there are thousands of fresh graduates out there, right? But the course that you have taken is something that could tell you apart, right? Give you a bit of a competitive edge depending on the course that you have taken, the university that you came from. Especially if you're listening today, you're from University of Malaya, we should probably put you kind of on top of the candidate list. So when you go for the interview, always always focus on selling your education. Again, right, don't assume that the hiring manager has really read your resume in detail. So um, as a fresh graduate, you don't really have a lot of experiences or internships. And most hiring managers, companies, we don't expect you to have a lot of experience, and that's okay. But the biggest thing that you have, and it's the most important thing that you have to sell, is your education background. So if you're answering questions such as, oh yeah, I'm an engineering fresh graduate, but it actually doesn't tell me anything. It just tells me, okay, you're a graduate, you're ready to work. But it doesn't tell me a little bit about what major or minor did you take? What got you interested in this industry? And what did you think your course or your degree has taught you that you're looking forward to translate in your maybe in this first job should you get hired? So give the hiring manager a little bit more perspective on what you have actually gained from your education and maybe some of the stuff that you may have done in your university in co-curricular activity. So again, like I said, right, always position yourself as the best candidate for the role, regardless of which section is you are being asked, whether is it career growth, education, internships, or experience. All your answers should always be targeted to give the hiring manager a little bit more understanding about how you can be the best candidate, be it from your education, your co-curricular activities, the skills, achievements, or even your internship. So this is a really, really important point to remember, because there are really thousands of fresh graduates out there. So if you're just telling people you're a fresh graduate, then there is really no differentiation factor. And especially when in my previous teams, when I hire fresh graduates, sometimes it is very difficult to split out which graduate is better than the other, because I hear so common answers that I don't I don't really feel I get to know what this candidate has to offer. So try to differentiate yourself. Just give additional information normally helps. Okay, so third one is no clear examples on experiences or achievements. So during the interview process, it's really important for you to share examples of any achievements or any skills that you have gained from your internship or maybe any part-time job that you have taken. So examples is normally a very good way of connecting and building rapport with the hiring manager, and also to give the hiring manager a little bit more context on how you have actually gained some of these skills. And I can give you a simple example on if you don't share examples, how it's actually going to look like. So when I interview fresh graduates, a lot of them will tell me this: oh, I have very strong communication skills. I have very strong communication and problem solving skills. And they just stop, like literally just stop. So in my mind, right, as a hiring manager, I will be thinking, okay, I'm sure you think that you have very good communication skills, but the question is, how do I know, right? Again, back to the purpose of the interview. The purpose of the interview is also for me as the hiring manager to validate what you have said in your resume. So I need evidence, I need examples of what you said that you have done and what you said that you are good at. So if you don't share examples with me, then it's kind of difficult for me to really understand whether do you actually have these skills. Have you actually done something that is related that you could continue to improve these skills, or demonstrated that you have good communication skills? So what happens is that it creates a lot of question mark in the hiring manager's mind, and having question marks during an interview process is never a good thing, because we will not hire candidates that gives I will not hire a candidate that gives me a lot of question marks, because it makes me think that if I hire this person in a full-time job, if this person consistently gives me a question mark, it's something that I should be very worried about. So yeah, so always remember preparing examples of your experiences, education, and your achievements is something that you will find it a lot easier to articulate and express during the interview process. Okay, so what's on this other side of the screen is also something that I've discussed a little bit earlier. So the first one is assuming the interviewer has read your CV. So like I said, to be honest, most interviewers don't spend like beyond 2 minutes reading your resume. So make sure that all the important points that you want to share during the interview, make sure that you actually specifically highlight that. So if you're given half an hour for the interview, don't waste that time. So use that time to share as many relevant information and achievement as possible to best position yourself as a candidate. Okay, the second thing that you should avoid, which actually relates to the assumption that we discussed a little bit earlier, where interview answers differ from resume. So this happens a lot if you are if you have the mindset that, oh, an interview is where I need to share things that are outside of my resume, things that are not in my resume, right? So if you have that kind of mindset, then you'll probably fall into this trap, this common mistake of interview answers differ from resume. So let me tell you this, please don't do this. It creates a lot of confusion. And the last thing you want from a hiring manager is confusion. Because if a hiring manager is confused, you will never get hired. So hiring managers, when I walk out of the interview room, I want to be very sure, or at least 90% sure that, okay, this candidate is really good. And I think we can probably, shortlist or make an offer. So if you do this mistake number two, what you are actually doing, but may not realize it, is that you're actually creating confusion. And confusion is very dangerous in a job interview. So make sure that again, focus on your resume. Everything needs to come out, everything needs to express from your resume. Don't talk about something completely different. Okay, so the last one also relates to what I just shared, which is what I call sharing irrelevant information. Again, the purpose of the job interview is to position yourself as the best candidate for this job that you're interviewing for. So don't talk about irrelevant information. You don't have to talk about your dogs and your cats. I actually did an interview prep with a student before, and he told me that so sometimes during interview they tend to ask you, oh, so what do you like to do and all these other things. So this candidate was very interesting. He told me that I told them I like to watch reality TV. So let me ask you guys very quickly, right? 5 seconds. When I tell you I like to watch reality show, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? And I can tell you what was the first thing that came to my mind is keeping up with the Kardashians, which is probably not like the thing that you want your hiring manager to know. But when I asked him a little bit further, because he was my client, so we had a little bit of time to work together, then he explained apparently some more beneficial reality shows. So just be careful, because the way you answer sometimes create a perception that may be incorrect from what you're trying to convey. I've also worked with other students or clients before where they then start talking about why they're interested in like dancing and like yoga and all those things. Please refrain from sharing irrelevant information, because again, you will create confusion for the hiring manager. So keep it precise, keep it focused on all your answers need to again convince the hiring manager that you are the best candidate for the role. So this understanding this purpose clearly will then help you determine whether what kind of information to share and what kind of examples that you can share. Because you need to remember, whatever that you say during the interview, you are being assessed and you are being judged, whether correctly, positively, or there may be slightly something negative related to that. So just be careful in the way that you articulate and express yourself. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next portion. All right. So this is really about during the job interview itself, preparing to tackle some of the common questions. So if you have been listening to the past half an hour, I've really given you quite a lot of tips on how you could actually prepare. So the secret to being successful in a job interview, right? To be honest, a lot of it is preparation. Is the preparation on how to approach the job interview correctly that will give you the best success during the actual interview process. Because if you don't prepare correctly, then you will definitely feel anxiety, you'll feel nervous, you'll feel low confidence, because you don't even know what your value is. You don't even know what you have to offer. You don't know your career direction. So that actually creates a lot of anxiety during the process. So if you did all the prep work that I talked about 30 to 40 minutes ago, then this should be a lot easier to answer. So let's go through some of the six items, and let me help you link it back to what I've shared earlier so that it helps make a lot more sense. Okay, first question that is very commonly asked is, tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself is also a question I find that a lot of candidates don't know how to answer. Because sometimes the most difficult question is talking about yourself, right? So let me give you another perspective. Tell me about yourself basically is a very similar question to what is your career goal. It may not look like it, but it's actually a very similar question. So when a hiring manager asks you, tell me about yourself. So what do you think they want to know? They want to know your education. They want to know your achievements. So basically what you did in school, given that you guys are all students. So what is your education? What are some of your achievements? Maybe some of the internship experiences that you have done at a high level. And they also want to know what are you looking for in this job, which then ties into your career goal. So there is a little bit of a formula to how to position this tell me about yourself question, which is a same question with what are you hoping to get out of this job? Why did you apply for this job? Why are you interested in this job? What is your career goal? Where do you see yourself in 3 years? Where you see yourself in 5 years? Actually, all these questions are similar questions. Again, like I said, it may not sound like that, but for a hiring manager, it is the similar question, because what we are trying to know is what is your background, skills, and experiences, and how do I know that you have the right um, education and skills to actually contribute in this role. And of course, I also want to know whether if this is the best job for you and it actually aligns with your career goal. So every single hiring manager at HR's worry is that I hire somebody and then they resign in 3 to 6 months. And that happens a lot because sometimes candidates, they themselves are not very sure what their career goal is. So um, we may both enter, both the employer and you enter this working relationship with a very, very different expectation. So when you want to prepare, always make sure that they ask me about, tell me about yourself, career goal. These are basically the same question. So if I were to go back on the earlier slide, basically preparing this part, very, very, very critical. And this education background as well. That this will actually help you answer these two questions and related questions, similar nature. So the actual question is different, but the nature of the question is actually the same. Basically, it's the same question that's being asked, but different interviewer uses a different question sometimes, depending on their own preferences. Okay, so let's actually move on to the next portion, which is what have you learned from this internship or part-time job? Give me, and then this other portion around, give me an example. So again, when this question is asked, it is about the hiring manager trying to understand whether are you applying for this job because it is the only job that you found, or you actually have made an effort to identify the skill set that you have gain, like the skills and experiences that you can gain from your internships and part-time job, and how this kind of makes you a better candidate and also makes this job a better fit. So sometimes when this question is being asked, right, they also want to understand how you can be a best candidate for this job. So talk about the skills that you have learned, and more importantly, like I said, always give an example. Always give an example. Because I've also worked with candidates and they will just tell me, oh, in the past I did 2 internships at this place and this place, and they just literally stop. But it doesn't give me enough information, because when we hire fresh graduates, what we want, very important, we want a person that is keen on learning. And these two questions is the best place you can demonstrate that you are continuously learning, even though you don't bring any full-time experience, but it's something that you have managed to still learn these skills or getting this kind of exposure in other areas, like for example, internships, part-time job, co-curricular activity, leadership programs and all those things. Okay, so we move on to this next part. What is your biggest strengths and weaknesses? So your biggest strength and weaknesses, right? Again, it's actually a question on self-awareness. And it sometimes actually links back to this question, what you have learned. So it doesn't look directly related, but actually it's a similar question. So when somebody asks you, what is your biggest strength and weaknesses? They actually want to know whether you have self-awareness on what you're good at and what you're not so good at. So if you want to talk about your biggest strength, talk about the biggest skill or biggest quality that you have. Again, always make sure you give an example. Don't just say, oh, I'm really, really good at leadership skills, and then just end there. Again, this is like not the best way to answer. So if you get asked on what your weaknesses is, you can be honest, but I would suggest spend 30% of the time talking about your weakness, 70% talking about how you are gradually overcoming that weakness, right? Don't kill yourself in this portion, because when you start talking about weaknesses, then it sometimes can come across a little bit negative. right? It may reduce your chances. So talk about the weaknesses a little bit, but more importantly, focus on, okay, I noticed that this is a weakness, but these are some of the steps that I've taken to try to overcome this challenge. So focus more on like the steps that you are taking to improve rather than just keep talking about the weakness itself. Okay, so the last question. So normally at the end of the interview, they will ask, do you have any questions for me? So always prepare at least 2 questions. And what I would recommend you to ask is, you can ask, so can you share more information about the team? So this is an important question because it shows the hiring manager that you are interested to work with a team. And that is 100% a requirement as a fresh graduate. You will not work alone. You will work with somebody else. So always ask, oh, can you tell me more about your team? And the other good question I also recommend is, if I were to be hired for this role, what would be some of like my key priorities for the first 3 months? So this shows that you are very interested in the job, and more importantly, you are also for the success of the team. So trying to understand, what the hiring manager expects from you, and basically how you can prepare to be the best candidate to perform within the first 3 months of the job. These are actually very, very good qualities to display. So these are the 2 questions I would recommend for you to ask at the end of a job interview. Okay, so there's a lot that I've shared today. But at the end of the day, right, as you can see, actually there is a flow. So just before we end, I just want to show you some of the top 12 skills if you want to put in your resume, and if this may be something that you want to share during the interview, you could choose some of these. So communication, leadership, emotional intelligence, maybe stakeholder management could be a good one. Other things include maybe critical thinking, problem solving skills, creativity, adaptability, time management, project management, self-organization. So all these are good skills if you just want to have a quick idea on what would be a good skill to share with the, to demonstrate that you are the best candidate, and also, of course, fits into your actual education and experiences so far. Okay, so we're sort of at the end of the session. So before we end, if you have any questions, just put it in the live stream so that the MC can pick it up. So before we end, I just want to show you very quickly. So if you want to work with me, I do work with a lot of clients and students for one-on-one sessions along the career journey. I do run group workshops as well. And this QR code that you see here is basically the link to my YouTube and Spotify. If you just want to have a little bit more of a longer form sort of content around career growth, job search, personality, you can just scan this QR code and you can find the free resources there. Okay, so I'll skip this one. So for earlier on when I was talking to the host, I was also mentioning that I do run other workshops such as LinkedIn profile branding, job search, resume writing, interview skills, and of course, soft skills on managing and talking to your boss. So I do have student rates as well. So if you're interested, you can drop me a message on LinkedIn, but please tell me that you are a student who attended this webinar today so that I can give you guys special rates. Okay, so that's it for my sharing today. I'll pass it back to the host, and maybe we can take a couple of questions. Thanks everybody for participating. Hope that you guys got some good insights from the sharing. Okay, so over to you, Amira.
Thank you so much to Ms. May Ping Lim for the sharing in important tips delivered during the workshop. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will move on to Q&A session. For any of you that have any question, feel free to type it in the live chat. I will now open the floor for questions. Okay, we have our first question from Noor Haryani. Will they really look at our pointers, or they will just go for those who have the potential?
What do you mean pointers?
I think what she meant is the interviewer, they look at our pointers, or they will go for those who have the potential. Which one, they will be lenient toward which one?
Okay, so I think when you say pointers, meaning that what you have collated in your resume, right? So maybe your academic achievement, all those things. Okay, so when we hire fresh graduate, right, a lot of things, what we are looking for is attitude, and I think self-awareness is very important. So it's actually a balance of both, but you should never make the assumption that your resume will immediately get you the job, because if that is the case, then there is no need for interview already. I can literally just take a resume and give you the job. So so your pointers will definitely be taken into consideration, because that is what the interviewer has considered before you even got invited for the interview in the first place. But during the interview process is for you to then demonstrate how these pointers that you have collated will then make you the best candidate for the role, and also to tell them the potential that you have and say that, oh yeah, I'm really keen to learn, I'm really interested in this industry, and based on all these things that I've done in university, part-time internships, this is how I think I can contribute. So actually it comes together. It is not separate. Yeah.
Thank you, Miss Mei Ping. Okay, we have our next question
Yeah.
from Nur Haryani again. Can we
Mhm.
ask them the things that we have to improve in order to secure a job opportunity after an interview?
Okay, so this is actually a really good question. So thanks, Nohayani. Really good question. Okay, so you can ask what you want to improve, but you need to ask this question very intelligently. Okay, so I actually give you the really big tip here. So a lot of candidates, what they do is that at the end of the interview, they ask the interviewer, "Oh, so can you tell me how I performed during this interview?" No interviewer is gonna give you an honest answer. Because if I tell you you have done well and then you didn't get shortlisted, then you may come back to me say, Mei Ping, you told me I did well, you know. So no interviewer will ever want to get caught in this situation. But if you really want a feedback, you can ask it intelligently and you can say, thank you for your time thank you for spending time interviewing me today. If you could share with me, maybe there's one thing I can improve from today's interview, would you mind sharing with me? So just ask for one thing. Normally one thing the interviewer will still tell you, but I've seen candidates, they will ask, oh, so how do you think I did? Do you think I'm the best candidate? And I think no interviewer is going to tell you this, because there's a lot more consideration beyond this interview today, because it's still, for as a hiring manager, I still need to match into my department's objective, budget, and a lot of other things as well. So it's not something that they can tell you immediately is a yes or no. But if you want to ask for feedback, you ask it intelligently, ask for one thing, normally they will share with you.
Thank you, Miss Mei
Okay.
Ping. Okay, can we have our next question?
Yeah, sure.
From Tivia Salvam, what is the best quality or skill for a fresh graduate? Normally, when we seek for a job, they require expertise. For example, 2 or 3 years of experience.
Okay, so this one, right? Actually, if you go back to my career journey, this actually links to job suitability. So when you are even selecting the job to apply for in the first place, you should look at the job requirements. So there are some jobs that require a lot of technical skills. So like for some engineering jobs, right, you may actually need to be at the field and so forth. So if you don't have that, it's going to be very difficult to apply, no matter you say how good your communication skills is and all those things. So a lot of it comes from looking at the JD. So if the JD requires something that's very technical, then maybe the 2 to 3 years is justified. And for you to try your luck, then if you do is there's no job suitability, the chances of you being successful in that role is probably not so high. However, if you look at the kind of JD, and a lot of times they mainly focus on the soft skill, and they may not necessarily have too much technical. They may say, okay, I need you to coordinate, I need you to do research and all those things. If these are the things that you can learn, then make sure that you position that in your resume correctly. So that would then increase your chances. I would say for fresh graduates, if you can, still try to go for the positions that are published as fresh graduates. And one of the best ways to search for these actually is on LinkedIn. So a lot of people are not using LinkedIn correctly, which I will not go through in today's session. But try to go for exact fresh graduate roles, or any roles that are, they said, okay, preferred 2 years or minimum 2 years. To me, you can try. But like I said again, back to job suitability and job requirements. If they require something so technical and you totally have never done that before, it is very unlikely the company will spend time training you when they can hire somebody immediately that already has that experience. But if it's soft skills and you have demonstrated that in your co-curricular activity, internships, then you will still be considered.
I
Okay.
see. Thank you, Miss Mei Ping. Okay, we have actually overwhelmed with question. Okay, can we move on to the next
Sure.
question? From East A Mats, from your experience, what are the usual career goals stated by interviewee, and the career goal will captivate the interviewers?
Okay, so if you're looking for me to give you an exact answer, I will not, because what what is worse when I interview fresh graduates that they all give me the same answer, because I'm not sure you guys go online and Google, right? Perfect answer. So never do that, because if you're doing that, right, can you imagine thousands of other graduates are also doing the same thing, right? So don't have a rehearsed answer. It's like the worst thing you can do. But it's actually the thing that you have to figure out for yourself, because it really then backs to the question of like, why did you even apply for this job? Do you like the industry? Do you like the department? Like, what actually interested you? And sometimes it could even go back to your education. Why did you even take this degree? There must be something that you got interested in. So share a little bit more about your background and say, why are you actually interested, and why you see yourself actually having a career 3 to 5 years in this space? Why this kind of knowledge is something that you want to gain. Please don't give the standard answer. My goal in 5 years is to become a manager. This is like the worst answer ever. Yeah. So this is really a great opportunity for you to share what actually got you interested in this industry and this position. Again, it's really about positioning yourself. So if you're expecting me to give you like a perfect answer, there's no perfect answer. In fact, 1,000 candidates are rehearsing that exact perfect answer.
Noted on that, Miss.
Yeah.
Okay, next question from Srivitya. Normally, employers ask the common question, which is our expected salary. How to justify that question and at the same time impress the employer?
Okay, so I'm not sure what you mean by impress the employer, but you should understand that every position has a budget. And sometimes, even though I may like you a lot, but if you're asking for what is beyond the budget, then sorry, the company has no money to pay you. I mean, that's really the reality. So what you could do is to do a little bit of a market research on what is the range. So by knowing the range, actually what you could do during the interview is talk about the range. Then you can say, I did a little bit of market research I did a bit of research before the interview, and I understand that normally for this position, the salary is between this range and this range. And you can say that I'm fairly flexible as long as the pay is, kind of within the market range. And more importantly, there is a growth opportunity, and there's actually things that I can learn and I can progress in this role. So never try not to give an exact number, because it's not so fun when somebody comes in, I demand 4,000, and I'm like, okay, yeah, sorry, it doesn't work like, because it actually shows a lot of your attitude. It actually is a question around attitude that you are being judged. It's not actually so much the number that you're asking for. Yeah, again, understand the purpose of the interview. Yeah.
Thank you, Miss Maypi. Okay, next question. From Nakwidin, how to ask an interviewer expectation they have of you as an intern? How to know you won't become the errand runner?
I think this is what everybody is scared about, right? Copy boy, copy
True.
girl, right? Uh, okay, so during the interview, what you could ask is, you can say, oh, okay, so if I were to join as an intern, what would be like my top 3 responsibilities? So this is actually, you're forcing the hiring manager to tell you that they actually have a plan for you, rather than just saying, you come lah, then we figure it out later, I tell you later. So this is like a telltale sign that they actually have no idea what they want you to do, or they are probably so busy that when you come in, they just shove you whatever, and they're probably not going to help you. So ask them, if I were to join as an intern, what would be like the top 3 responsibilities or priorities that or maybe projects that I would be getting in, I would get involved in. So this will then allow you to understand if they have a plan for you, and more importantly, what you're hearing, is this something that you feel that you can learn and you can gain some skills. So whether that works or not is really up to you at the end, because while the interviewer is choosing you for the internship, you are also choosing them as a company that can help you grow. Okay.
Thank you, Miss Maypi. Okay, how about next question?
Yeah, sure.
From Ace Email again, how does LinkedIn plays an important role in job searching? How they approach the candidate?
Okay, so given the audience is Malaysia, so LinkedIn is something that I can go on for hours and hours, because I do run a LinkedIn profile branding and job search workshop. But I give you some perspective here. LinkedIn in Malaysia is actually still quite new. So a lot of people are still trying to figure out how to use LinkedIn. And based on what I've seen right now, people use it as a bit of a Facebook and Instagram, which is really the wrong way of using it. But I have used LinkedIn since 2012. So that's 9 years ago. And since then, I've actually gotten a lot of opportunity to interview at big companies, including Google. So Google was a role that I was invited for an interview and for free food at the office. I actually didn't apply for any job there. Yeah. So if I can give you just a quick tip, LinkedIn starts with your LinkedIn profile. Right, your LinkedIn profile is like your online resume. If your LinkedIn profile is in a mess, and most people's LinkedIn's profile are in a mess, then it's gonna be very difficult, because if somebody comes across your profile, they don't get to know what you can contribute as a professional, then it's very unlikely they will reach out to you. Of course, on LinkedIn itself, there are actually some very specific job search methods that can be done. So I won't go through in detail today, because in my workshop, I do teach it step by step. It's very detailed. But the perspective I'll give you here is this: as a fresh graduate, it is very unlikely they will approach you. Very unlikely. Because there are just so many out there. So for fresh graduate on LinkedIn, normally I recommend you go and approach them. It's a much higher chance of success. Because just to give you a little bit of perspective, I know we are running out of time. Every recruiter and HR on LinkedIn, when they want to approach a candidate, they have credit from a paid account, but they have a limited credit. So normally they will only use that kind of credit for manager or director position. It's very unlikely they will use it for anybody who has worked for less than 5 years, generally speaking. But there are actually a lot of other profile branding and like job search methods that I can probably teach you in my workshop. So if you're interested to join, you can send me a message after this. I mean, I can't go through it; it's just too much already. Maybe MC, we can take maybe 2 more questions before we end.
We have a few more minutes, so maybe we can pick one more question. Is it okay, Miss Maybe?
Yeah, I think 2 more is okay.
2 more. Okay. Okay, how about our next question? From Santil Kumari. Nowadays, interviews conducted online. What are the extra criteria that we should be acquired of, or what employers are looking for specifically during online interview?
Okay, so online interview actually is not too different from an offline interview. And if you are very ambitious and you want to work in a global company, regional company, online interviews are actually very common. I've been interviewing online with Google since like 2013, or yeah, a very long time ago. So it's just preparation work. I think is quite important, because you just want to make sure that you actually try to dial in advance and just like test all the technical stuff. Because if you don't do that, actually what it portrays is that this person is not ready. And like I said, when we hire fresh graduate, a lot of it we look for mindset, and we look for proactiveness. So sometimes it's not about the online interview, it's actually how you approach that interview tells me a lot more about you. So do a little bit of a prep work. And normally what I suggest is like try to get a clean background if you can. So sometimes because during the job interview is to make sure that the interview is actually focusing on you. The last thing you want is for them to focus on behind. You got baju, got bed, got I don't know what's going on. So it can be quite distracting. So if you can either, I mean, sometimes I even recommend candidates, if you really, your house is in a mess, maybe go to a friend's house or somebody willing to help, so that you can be as professional as possible. Yeah. There is actually one mistake that I want to share with you. And this is something that when I did a mock interview with one of my clients who's a graduate, and this was an error that he made. And I think it's a really critical error. Okay, so when you go for a face-to-face interview, right, normally you sit quite far from the interviewer, right? After shake hand, everything is very formal. You feel the distance, because you feel, okay, they're sitting there, I'm sitting here. But in an online interview, sometimes you may feel that your interviewer is your friend, because it's just you and that person talking, right? So you may feel that the interviewer is your friend. And never forget that your interviewer is not your friend. Because that mock interview I did with this candidate, I think after a while he forgot that I was his interviewer. And at the end, I actually told him, I said, I made an observation, and I think you forgot that I was an interviewer, because I saw he got so comfortable talking to me, like talking to a friend, no? And when you talk to a friend, your body language, the way you say things actually is quite different. And he said, yeah, actually I forgot, because you were so friendly, I forgot. So remember that you're talking to an interviewer, you're not talking to your friend, even though you may feel there is less distance because Zoom and everything, but always remember that this is a professional setting. Yeah. Okay, so we take the last question, right?
Yeah, sure. Okay, for our last question
Mhm.
from Sophia, is a thank you letter necessary after an interview?
I would recommend it, because most of the time interviews are interviewing a few candidates, right? So you're not the only one. So if you want to send a thank you message. Normally, it's appreciated. Letters, in terms of like actual letters, sometimes I think it's a bit of an overkill. But if you happen to have their email address, definitely email them. And the best thing I suggest you is this: go on LinkedIn and add them, and then say thank you on LinkedIn. And because that will create a much bigger impression. And on top of that, you may directly get connected to the interviewer's network. Because I can tell you a personal story, because this is last question, so we will end now. So if anybody's interested to listen to my Google story, I can probably share a little bit, maybe 1 minute. I'm not sure, is it okay, MC?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Okay, so for the Google interview, I was actually invited for the interview. So we did 5 rounds. I wouldn't say I was that interested in the role, but not everybody gets a chance to interview with Google. So I thought, okay, let me go try. And after 2 rounds, I still advanced. Eventually, I finished the whole cycle. I think it was 5 rounds overall. So one thing was that eventually I didn't take the job. I declined. But what was important was that I maintained connection with the hiring manager. And sometimes, we still do keep in touch and like, Merry Christmas, all these things. So these are things that can go a long way because people move from one company to the other. And I can tell you another example is, and this is something I teach more in my LinkedIn workshop on how to network correctly. So the actual real referrals, right? The real referrals you will get are the people who have actually worked with you before. So if you think that spamming people on LinkedIn is going to get you a job, it actually doesn't really happen. I don't know what other influencers are teaching you guys, but actually it doesn't actually happen. The best people who can get you a job are people you have worked with before, maybe in your internship or maybe your leadership programs, and you participate in like workshops. So people who work with you before are the highest chances that they can recommend you because they have experience working with you before. They can 100% validate the quality and skills that you have. So by connecting with them, sometimes your profile pops up and wish them Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all these things. And because you're top of mind, sometimes they will reach out to you. And that's something that personally has happened a lot for me. So when I was with Standard Chartered, I actually took a 6 month sabbatical. So 6 months, I returned to Malaysia for family reasons. And during the 6 months, because I was really connected to a lot of my ex-colleagues and they've worked with me before. So during the period, a lot of them reach out to me, say, hey, actually I have this position in my team and we're doing some reorganization. Are you interested in this? Are you interested in that? So I was not actively looking, but they came to me. So it's much better to attract opportunities, right? Rather than hunting for it. Hunting is not very fun. Yeah. So if you set your LinkedIn profile correctly, you network correctly, and you maintain a really good relationship, demonstrate your value when you are actually in that internship or the job, actually that relationship goes a much longer way because I've gotten a lot of referrals over the years. And even one of my ex-bosses right now is running his startup in Germany. And every 6 months, he's asking me if I would move to Germany. And the answer obviously is still no, because I paid 42% tax. I'm not going to pay 42% tax. So, like I said, when you make a good impression and you are clear on your career direction, what you can, the value that you bring, this impression is something that is your professional reputation. So your professional reputation is something that will accompany you along the journey. So don't see it as a silo, piece by piece. So that's why I wanted to share the career journey slide with you guys to really help you understand that this thing is really like a flow. So if you just do bit by bit, eventually you will find it's very frustrating. So yeah, plan your career in the flow. Actually really does go a long way. Okay, so hopefully that helps. I know we kind of exceeded a little bit, but hopefully everybody got some good insights.
Yes, I believe everyone got a good point, great point from you. Thank you so much, Miss Mei Ping. Right, I think we have come to the end of our workshop where we have shared plenty of knowledge regarding how to approach an interview. Again, I would like to thank Miss Mei Ping Lim for the insightful explanation and numerous points shared during the workshop, and also for answering all of the questions. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we end our workshop today, let us all switch on our camera and give the brightest smile for a photography session. We wait a bit for technical team. Right, thank you so much. This workshop has come to its end. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for attending our VSF 2021 workshop. We truly appreciate it. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to apologize if we have done any mistakes throughout the event. With that, till we meet again, I am Amira Arianti. Assalamualaikum. Thank you and good day.